Hello and welcome to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. The Society for Hospitality and Food Service Management is the only association focused on workplace hospitality and amenities in the food service industry. Hello and welcome back to Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. I'm your host, Michael Moore, and in today's episode, we're going to continue our series on innovations and sustainability, and really finding something that forces our industry to sit up and take notice. And today, I am very excited because we are joined by Chef Mark Allison, an educator, author, the corporate executive chef at Forever Oceans. And honestly, if you take a look at his resume, there's not much he hasn't done so far. So Mark, thanks for jumping on and joining us.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So before we really get into sustainability and what we're seeing and kind of exploring, what you've done in your career, I have to ask, what is Forever Oceans? I mean, I've been at some of the wonderful things that you've done as a company, but for those that don't know, what is Forever Oceans?
We are in aquaculture and we ocean raise fish. Kamachi is our species at the minute, but we will be coming out with a group of barramundi and snapper next year. But we're doing it completely different to any other aquaculture organization. We are at least 10 miles offshore, so we don't erode the seabed. Our fish swim in their natural environment in a depth of 1,000 feet. So basically they're in their own current and fighting for survival, just like normal fish would do in the wild, only ours are surrounded by an enclosure.
And so they're 1,000 feet down. How do you know what's going on down there?
Everything is automated. We have satellites, we have drones.
You have drones.
Our carbon footprint is very small because we're not actually sending people out into the ocean every day. So it's basically every week to 10 days that somebody might actually go out to one of the enclosures to refeed the fish. Because everything else is automated. So we have our R&D facility in Kona, Hawaii, and that's where all our technicians monitor the health and wellness of each fish and every fish. Because if one fish sort of has a problem, we have a robot that dives into the water and takes that fish out. So it's all high tech, innovative, and sustainable.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm very lucky to be in the position I'm at. I started with the company as a consultant about 3 years ago and started full time with them 2 years ago. And I just love the position I've got.
And I was looking earlier at the culinary board that you're a part of, and there's some really well-known, very impressive names up there alongside yours as well. So obviously, whatever you're working on in terms of sustainability and innovation, I think it's achieving what we're talking about today, which is helping people sit up and take notice of what's next, what's important in the industry. So
exactly, if you look at the growth of the world population, by 2050 we're going to need 50% more protein. Seafood is going to double in consumption. And what we're trying to do is restore the health of the ocean, but also provide a sustainable protein that is clean, that is high in omega-3, and that can be ocean raised and protect the oceans in the future.
Wow.
So it's a great organization to be working for.
Yeah, it just sounds like something fun to talk about every day. It's one of those, you don't always run into a position, I think, in your career where people ask you what you do and you're like, oh, strap in, we're going for a ride. But that's one of those, which is,
Michael, I've been a chef for 42 years and I've had a great career. I've always known when to move to the next position. And I keep telling people I've never worked a day in my life because I just thoroughly enjoy what I do. And now I'm turning 60 very soon.
Don't believe that, but go on.
What a way to end my career at this company. That would be absolutely amazing.
That is. And we need to go into that. So yes, right now you're marrying Skynet and robots and sustainability and all those wonderful things, but you didn't start there. I mean, were you born a chef? Was it something in your family, or how did you get your start in the culinary world?
Michael, it's strange about sustainability being the key word these days, but over 40 years ago, my father was a factory worker, but loved to garden.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was a cleaner and she loved to cook. So I used to help my father in the garden growing fruits and vegetables. And then every weekend I'd help my mother in the kitchen actually cooking and serving the produce from the garden. And that's where it started, around about the age of 14 years old. And when I got 16, I was basically, what am I going to do when I leave school? Because in England, you leave school at 16 unless you're one of the very fortunate that is going to go on to university, which is still to this day is around about 10% of the population.
Oh.
And my father says, don't work in a factory. So I had a choice. I could either go and work in a car factory,
Mm-hmm.
go down the mines, or shipbuilding. And I enjoyed cooking. So he said, well, why don't you become a chef? And that's exactly what I did. And I've loved it ever since.
Wow. So your options were working in a mine, working in a
Yep.
factory, being a shipbuilder, which
Yep.
I don't even know how you start that. I mean, that,
Well, Michael, I keep telling people I left school at the age of 16, and it was in the day where people were left behind.
mm-hmm.
And when I left school, I could barely read or write. I can remember being at school just staring out the window, wanting to play around. And so I enjoyed being in the kitchen. So
Mm-hmm.
I became a chef at 16, and I had various positions and traveled a lot through Europe. But at the age of 24, I then realized, well, when I get to 60, do I still want to be working in a kitchen? And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, you know what? I really need to educate myself. So at the age of 24, while working full time, I went to night school for the next 10 years. And I got 5 years culinary experience, a degree in education, and then a
Mm-hmm.
master's degree in business administration. And that's really when my life took off, through education, because then I became a teacher, a culinary instructor. And I moved from Newcastle upon Tyne
Mm-hmm.
down to Swansea in Wales, and I became a teaching instructor at Port Talbot College. And for the next 10 years, I educated students in culinary arts, but also we entered virtually every competition in Europe over that 10-year period. And we had a 50% success rate of either winning that competition or coming in the top three.
Wow.
So much so in
Wow.
2001, I believe it was, in 2002, we won the biggest student competition in Europe, the Nestle Top Door. And that's when Johnson & Wales University reached out to me and asked me to come and teach for them. So we moved to America in 2004.
I was
And
going to ask how, you've been a dean a couple of times in your career. I was going to ask how that kind of cropped up as an opportunity, but that makes a ton of sense.
yeah, one of the deans was one of the international judges for the Nestle Talk,
Ah,
and they invited me over, and then they offered me a job. And the first year we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and then the following year we moved to Charlotte in North Carolina, and
mm-hmm.
then basically 2 years later I was promoted to the dean of culinary arts at that campus, and led that
Wow.
campus with 1,400 students, 50 instructors, and 10 staff for the next 6 years. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had some great students, great instructors. It's a great school. And then at that same time, my wife was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So my whole philosophy changed to healthy eating. So my whole philosophy now is that I take what I call one ingredient foods,
Mm-hmm.
which is like an apple or banana or a piece of fish or a piece of meat that has got no additives, preservatives, or colorants in, and then I produce recipes and make meals out of that. So at that stage, my wife was given 3 years to live. We changed our eating habits. There was no treatment for her, but
Mm-hmm.
she survived 8 years before passing away in 2015. And at
Wow.
that time, being left to look after three boys, I decided I needed to move on. So I became the Dean of Culinary Education at the New Orleans Hospitality and Culinary Institute. And then I moved to the Dole Food Company, where I was Director of Culinary Nutrition for the Dole Nutrition Institute. And at that stage, I was working with Walt Disney Corporation, writing all the recipes for mega films such as Beauty and the Beast and Star Wars and Cars 3. So
Really?
it's been an interesting career, but a
That
fun.
There is so much to wade through in what you just said in the last 5 minutes. I mean, from significant and I'm sorry to say tragic, life-changing experiences being thrown into, or becoming like a dad of 3 and trying to figure out how to do that in a very different scenario. And then you move on to, corporate role. Was the decision to go into corporate roles kind of to free up your work-life balance and find a little bit more there? Or was it just something you needed a fresh start, a change?
Uh, Michael, it's funny how your life never seems to turn out the way that you've planned it, but it somehow turns out the best way it could possibly turn out under the circumstances. When my wife passed away, when she was battling cancer, I needed good health insurance, especially living in America where it's all private. So basically, my career was put on hold for a certain extent to basically find jobs that had very good health insurance, but still enjoy the work at the same time, because 2 of my boys out of the 3 are type 1 diabetics. And if you know anything about diabetes, they're insulin dependent, so they need medical attention 24/7. But all the jobs that I took on actually enhanced my career at the same time, while providing benefits that I needed to look after the family. And in my opinion, family always comes first. So they were the focal point of my life, my 3 boys. My wife, I was married for 20 years to the most amazing lady in the world. And 20 years was not enough time. But when you're living with somebody that lived every day of a life, it's amazing how much time that actually covers. And we just had such a great marriage, and I had a great relationship with my wife. My wife was an amazing mother, but when you're fighting stage 4 cancer, there's really only one outcome. So we made the most of my wife, and the most of the time we had with her. We traveled a great deal, and she left a great impact on my 3 boys, and I've got 3 amazing boys. So corporate was basically looking at how could I spend more time with the family, provide for them, and provide them good health insurance, which came with being a corporate chef.
Wow. I usually build on something like that, but it's just such a wonderful outlook on opportunities that we have, even if they're brief, and the wonderful relationships that you have, and recognizing it. And it sounds like you've kind of incorporated a fully different outlook on life, given everything that you've experienced, and it changed the way you thought about food. It changed the way you cooked. It changed the way you lived. Was that one of the first kind of steps into sustainability for you? Because I know where you are right now, it's a huge focal point, and it kind of meshes in a lot of ways with the way you approach foods with the one ingredient recipes. Was that the start, or are they unrelated?
I think this, I came from a background of French cuisine where it was a lot of butter, salt, sugar.
Beautiful thing.
Absolutely amazing food.
Yeah.
Not great for your health. And then in 1998, I was asked to go on a Fulbright Teachers Exchange program. And I was, coming up in the 70s and the 80s, brought up on Starsky and Hutch and the streets of San Francisco. I thought this is a great opportunity to move to America for the very first time and live in California. Out of 500 instructors, there was only one chef, and he did not live in California. He actually lived in Anchorage, Alaska. And so we turned that opportunity down, and then he rang me up and said, please, my daughter's at Oxford University. This is my last chance to visit her in England. So we decided to go. And we had an amazing time, Michael, in Anchorage, Alaska. But my middle son, Matthew, at the time, that's when he became a type 1 diabetic. And that's when my whole philosophy changed on cooking, was to actually provide him with nourishing food that was healthy. So this goes back to around about 1998, when my philosophy of food changed to more basically one ingredient foods that are sustainable, that are healthy, that are full of nutrition. And then, of course, when my wife was diagnosed in 2008 with stage 4 cancer, that really came into play. So now my whole philosophy is basically sustainable food that is full of nutrition, that is healthy, that is seasonal, that is easy to prepare.
And I've tasted some of your menus, and your recipes are incredible. The execution's incredible, and I think the simplicity in the ingredients and the lack of additional things in there, that it's one of those, outside looking in, you can say, oh, maybe that detracts from it, but it does not at all. It just amplifies the wonderful natural flavors and pretty much everything I think I've ever had from you or seen. How, though, did you take that and end up where you are right now? How did you get to Forever Ocean?
You know what? Life is funny, because when I worked as the director of culinary nutrition for the Dole Nutrition Institute, I happened to be at a nutrition conference, and I met a very special lady called Monica San Miguel. And we kept in touch. She had started her own company on nutrition. And about 4 years after that meeting, she reached out and said, I've just taken on this new position at a startup company called Forever Oceans. And my whole idea is to hire a chef, build a culinary board through chefs, and highlight this amazing natural protein. So that's when Monica reached out to me about 3 years ago, and I came on as a consultant at Forever Oceans and started writing recipes. And it's just amazing how things sort of fit into your life. I'm all about one ingredient food, and this Campacci uses no preventative additives. There's no coloratives, preservatives, or anything artificial that's in the fish. It's just a natural, clean protein that is packed full of omega-3. So it fits well with everything that you put with it, whether it's basically pan fried or barbecued or smoked or served raw, because it's sashimi grade. It tastes absolutely amazing. And then you combine it with one ingredient foods, and all of a sudden you've got these amazing recipes and dishes that people love.
That we talk about this on other episodes, but it just, every time it comes up, it shocks me how well having a good network can create opportunities for career growth. I mean, you talked earlier about how you started at Johnson & Wales because one of the international chefs there was judging your team and what you're doing and took notice. And then you met Monica and created that relationship, and she took notice and said, oh, here's something else that you might fit well for you. It's one of those things that I think being involved in our industry and being willing to go out there and just meet people and do whatever you can to stay active. It's it's so impactful.
I think, human beings are social creatures. We like to be in groups and with friends and meeting new friends. And I like to be social. I like to meet new people. I've never interviewed for a job in over 28 years. So I've been exceptionally lucky. And I think it's really through networking that you meet people that it could be next week or next year or 5 years from now might reach out to you and offer you an absolutely amazing position, just like Monica offered me this amazing position now, which I thoroughly enjoy doing. I get to travel a lot. I get to work with the best produce. I get to work with great people. And I totally believe in the mission of the company, is to feed the world a high quality natural protein, but at the same time, restore the oceans.
And that kind of leads naturally into what we want to talk about today, which is, let's explore sustainability in food and what you're seeing right now. We've talked about what you're doing with Forever Oceans, but kind of past that, what are you seeing in food sustainability that is a trend, that is something that is going to be here for the foreseeable future?
I think we need to be looking at natural products that we can raise or grow to get the best nutrition out of them, because I think that's one of the biggest problems we face in this country, and certainly around the world, is if you look at disease, number one is heart disease, number two is cancer, then just further down the line you've got type 2 diabetes. And then with the pandemic, a lot of people who died during the pandemic had underlying causes that actually killed them. And a lot of disease, up to 85% of heart disease, type 2 diabetes and cancer, is food related. So I think we've got to be looking at sustainable food that is actually full of nutrition, that is actually benefiting mankind by making them healthy. And I think that's what we've really got to look at, is the way that we grow food, the way that we harvest food, the way that we package food, and stop eating so much processed food that is just packed full of preservatives, colorants, and things that you might not necessarily need in your body.
Got it. And how is, you've talked about technology. I mean, you're utilizing it now. What kind of role do you think that fits in with? Because there's almost you're talking about how do I phrase it? Like stepping back into way we used to grow foods many years ago, before things got a little bit more complicated and things like preservatives, or for good or ill, were put in there. And so that's kind of like the step back in the way that we're approaching things like farming and aqua farming and those types of things. But how does technology support that? What are you seeing out there that's just kind of blowing your mind?
I think for us, especially at Five Oceans, is the fact that we basically everything is automated. So when you're 10 to 20 mile offshore in that natural environment, our enclosures can withstand a Hurricane 4 storm, that we can submerge the enclosures underneath the water without anybody being there. Our carbon footprint is very small because there's no boats going out there until the feed needs to be restocked. Everything is automated. Everything is done by satellites. It's monitored by drones. So our carbon footprint is exceptionally small. But yet the fish are in a perfect environment because they're in their own natural habitat, just surrounded by a large net. They're fed a sustainable feed. And then they're harvested at the correct time. There's no parasites. We don't use preventative antibiotics. So it ends up being a really clean, natural protein with a very small carbon footprint. So I think technology in our case works perfectly well. In the farming industry, I'm sure there's new techniques and new technologies that actually enhance the soil to get more nutrition out of the soil to grow better crops.
And it's interesting to see, because chefs traditionally are a little bit against, I don't want to say change, but technology is not always their best friend, and embracing it. And it's interesting to see, you obviously have a very different point of view on it, but are you seeing a larger adaptation in the culinary world of chefs kind of embracing technology to make their lives easier, to increase sustainability?
I do with like I'm going on nearly 60, so but I still feel quite young. But I love working with the younger chefs because you can draw from their energy, and it's like anything, that top percent of people who want to change the world and make things better. These younger chefs coming through, they're very enthusiastic about how technology can bring back sustainable food and help in creating the perfect dishes that they're going to serve in their restaurants or hotels or whatever culinary field they're in, but at the same time giving good nutrition through that food. And a lot of technology now is giving back food that nutrition that we desperately need. So I would say yes, the younger chefs who are like, the ones in the next 10 or 15 years that are going to be the next Thomas Keller or Gordon Ramsay, they're the movers and shakers, and they're the ones who are embracing new technology.
And, as we go through this, one thing that I think has always been important in food and important in really any event, from a catered event to designing a menu, is storytelling, and the ability to get people to buy into what you're doing and what you believe in through effective storytelling. How in your world are you using that when you're talking about sustainability and what you're doing and what's important to you? What role for you does storytelling play?
I think storytelling is very vitally important because everybody loves a good story. And as long as you tell the truth from the start of the story and you end with the truth, and you're passionate about what you're saying and you believe in what you're saying. And I've had a 42-year career. I hope I've got about another 10 years to go. But I only get involved with things that I'm actually passionate about. And whether it was education, 20 years I
Mm-hmm.
was in education. I thoroughly enjoyed my time as an educator. I had 14 to 16 years in restaurants and hotels. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And I just love the story about culinary arts because to me, one of the reasons why I became a chef was I found out very early, probably around about the age of 15 or 16, that you can make friends very easily if you know how to cook.
That
Because
is
everybody loves food, everybody
so
loves a
true.
chef, and if you spin the story around good food, good company, good friendship, sustainably sourced food, then you're telling a truthful story because everybody loves food. Everybody likes to eat food together as a group, whether it's your family or your friends. But everybody likes good food, and if it's sustainably sourced,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a win-win situation in my mind. So I'm very passionate about food. I'm very passionate about um, positive people and the impact that we can create in this world today just by being more positive in general.
And then I think the important takeaway there on storytelling that you touched on is the truth. It's I think if you start, like you said, with something that you're passionate about and that you believe in, obviously you're starting with the truth there. And people can buy into that work because it's simple. It's not overcomplicated. It doesn't make them ask questions like why or that doesn't make sense or whatever. It's the simplicity and the truth, I think, that is a key takeaway there in storytelling that, you know, whether it starts off true or not, sometimes we overcomplicate things to try to get people to buy into it, but it's just it's too much. It's not necessary.
And Michael, I totally agree. I think in general, we overcomplicate life. You know,
Yeah.
when you think about it, there's very few things we actually need. We need air, we need water, we need food, we need water, clothes, and we've all got 24 hours in the day. So when people tell me that I haven't got the time, I'll say, well, everybody's got 24 hours, so you've just got to actually put the important things first. And if you tell the truth right from the beginning, like you just said, then people will buy into it. And if you keep life simple, which is basically, in my mind, you eat good food, you
Hmm.
communicate effectively with people, you look after your body by exercising every day, you don't get yourself in too much debt, and you try not to stress over things that more than likely are not going to happen. And you keep your life simple, you can actually enjoy and have a good life.
I don't know if you are a life coach, but you should probably maybe the next 10 is just you looking at younger generations and saying, "Don't do that. No, don't do that."
Michael, that was part of my job at Johnson& and Wales and Newport Talbot College was just to get in front of the students and actually try to motivate them to be the best person they could possibly be. And I just love talking to chefs in general
Hmm.
and people that want to listen because sometimes we get a lot of negativity about being a chef or being in the hospitality trade because of the long hours, possible drugs or alcoholism and different
Hmm.
things. But again, if you keep your life simple and you've got a goal and a target to reach for, and you want to be an executive chef or you want to be the next Thomas Keller or Gordon Ramsay, it's all about just planning that future and taking small steps until you arrive at that destination. So to me, I think anything to motivate people in the right direction, it makes me smile as well because I just think hopefully I've helped somebody along the way.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, if you look at sustainability from a life choice perspective or from like a worldview, that's just one way to make sure you don't get burnt out, to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're staying healthy in whatever way you can, physically, mentally, emotionally, all the important ways. It is, but it's something that just gets pushed aside really quickly, I think, in the mad dash for success.
I think you know what I would totally agree with you. I think it's baby steps and take your time, and if it's meant to be, it will actually happen. And then when you arrive at that destination, like you've just said, hopefully mentally wise, you're still in a good place, and physically wise, you're still in a good place. Sometimes it just takes a bit longer than what you actually think, but actually that length of time gives you more experience.
Hmm.
Uh, you learn more, you can adapt more, and you can enjoy life more because you're still physically and mentally fit.
So I think, in sustainability and what we've talked about, whether you're approaching your personal life, your professional life, food, all that kind of stuff, what if you had to pick two or three things where you see the most growth in that in our industry? And it could even be self-care, because I think sustainability just goes so many different directions.
I,
Where
I would
where do you see our focus going?
I think in this current climate, especially after coming out of the pandemic, even in hospitality, I think we really need to look at health and wellness. And like
Hmm.
you just said before, mental illness is a terrible thing. And also anything to do physical wise, keeping yourself healthy. I think that's going to be something that is going to change dramatically over the next few years because health insurance rises every year. The cost of medication rises every year. 4 out of every 5 Americans are on some kind of prescription medication. We need to make people more healthy. And I think even in our trade, getting back to the basics and producing really high quality, healthy food that is sustainably sourced will help people along the way. Because there's more and more packaged foods that you just boil in the bag or put in the microwave and then serve on a plate in a restaurant. I think going back to the roots and sourcing from the
Hmm.
farmer uh, real food and cooking it correctly using simple techniques, then we're all going to benefit.
Uh, I mean, I agree. I think it's the idea of you put good in, you get good out, and it starts with food, but it continues with taking care of yourself mentally, making sure that you're keeping it simple, like you talked about, and really just not getting lost in and I'm 100% at fault with this, getting lost in kind of all the unnecessary stuff, the stuff,
Yeah.
the
It,
Amazon shipments, the the saying I've done this or I have that, and I'm like I said, I'm only talking about myself right now. I get lost in it sometimes, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Just keeping it simple is so important.
that's my life now, and that seems to be my philosophy, and it's working for me. When I was the dean and I had 1,400 students,
Hmm.
then 1,400 students came around about 3,000 parents, and then also all the staff and
Hmm.
all the teachers, and it was sometimes I thoroughly enjoyed it, but sometimes it was rather stressful. Now
Yeah.
it's basically I'm a one-man show with 50 ambassadors on the culinary board that I interact with, and it's a lot less stressful and a lot more enjoyable. And it's all about really keeping it simple and just focusing on what you need to focus on. And to me, is just coming up with beautiful recipes for this amazing fish and spreading the word about sustainability and about how aquaculture can improve the planet.
I'm in. I'm sold. I'm sold.
Excellent.
So before we let you get back to your day, I end every single podcast with a single question. Um, and that is, if you had the ability to reach back through time and you had 30 seconds to talk to your younger self, what is one thing you'd tell yourself? What's the one thing that you would say in that 30 seconds?
I would say don't worry so much because things happen for a reason. But if you can learn from that situation, it only makes you stronger. And the other thing I would say is life is so short. Enjoy every moment the best you can. Get out, travel, try new food, try new cultures. It's okay about watching something on Netflix, but when you actually immerse yourself in a different culture, a different environment, and meet people, then your whole world opens up. So to me, food and travel and making friends are probably and family are probably the most important things in my life. And if I look back and I said to my younger self, I would just travel more, I would meet more people, and I would just enjoy life more.
I don't know about the rest of our listeners, but this was good for my soul. So I appreciate you taking the time to jump on with us today, share some of the insight that you've gained over the last years in your career, and just the unique way, and I think a good perspective we all need to take on things, which is keeping it simple, take care of yourself, focus on really what's important, and it's not necessarily what's coming in the mail tomorrow.
Exactly, exactly. And it might never come in the mail.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Enjoy
So
it while you can. But thank you,
but
Michael, for this
yeah,
opportunity. Really enjoyed it.
This was incredible. Thank you. And for everyone at SHFM, I highly recommend get in touch with Mark. Probably make some introductions if you don't mind, Chef, because there's some people that you probably need to meet.
That would be good.
But for everyone at SHFM, that's it for today's episode of Served by SHFM. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. Please keep in mind that the views and opinions expressed on today's episode are not necessarily those of SHFM or any of its members.